AMC Universal City Walk is a great place to see that film.
It's a great place,
also.
but don't
Huge
ever
screen.
go to the concession stand. It is so complicated there. Half of it you have to wait in line. The other half you have to pre-order. You have to get hot in a different line than popcorn. Maybe bring your own snacks. I didn't say that. So I was a very serious child actor. I think that's why potentially, the universe was like, you will play the young Jodie Foster. It was the first time I was ever asked to do something technically difficult, not as a human, but for the camera, right? So they were changing speeds. We were doing a handheld. I had to stay in a certain frame. There was just so many things that were really complicated that I was just like, as they were describing it to me, the director and the DP and the camera operator, I was like, oh, this is like my time to shine. Like, I'm a serious actor. Like, I can do this. And I just thought it was just so fun. I remember seeing that scene of the mirror and being like, doesn't look that complicated. We spent so much time. It looks so effortless. You know what I mean? I was like, we put a lot of work. I thought it was going to look way more, like different. And what it was trying to achieve was something effortless, something so blended that it felt like it just blurred into your mind. And I guess when I was shooting it, I thought it was going to be like some action sequence or so. You know what I mean? Like it was going to be this big heralded moment. But the beauty of it is that it just blurs through, it's sort of something that catches you off guard. And so I remember seeing it and being kind of disappointed as a kid, actually, which is so hilarious that now it's one of the things that's talked about so much.
Your character is introduced listening to sounds in the stars, and now, almost 20 years later, you've described your new album, Flowers for Men, as sci-fi folk, which is such a cool subgenre.
I love sci-fi. I feel like probably every part of my life has been influenced by the sci-fi genre, and I think that it was only a matter of time before we started thinking of it as a subgenre within music because of how electronic music has always been pushing itself towards. I mean, Neil Young basically invented the genre with his trans album that he made that was all on autotune, that was very much like beautiful kind of folk songs in the 70s. I love where you can push into spaces where you're reimagining humanity and sort of dismantling humanity. And I think science fiction has always kind of been a perfect space to do that. And I think Contact was a really, one of the most humanistic, non-violent, poetic science fiction films I think there ever was. The fact that I got to be a part of it definitely started my journey on a high. How could you not have Robert Zemeckis affect your storytelling and your songwriting? There was this genre of film that we don't have anymore, and it was called made for television, right? So there was a film that was a film. It was not a series. It was not a limited. It was a film that was just made to be seen on TV. And so now we don't really have that because everything's seen on TV, even smaller. They're seen in a small little device while we're scrolling through Instagram. But that felt like a film. I felt like I grew up making films and not television movies. And so even Hope, which Goldie Hawn had directed, it was her directorial debut, and Ellen Foster, which John Irwin did. There was just all of these really interesting filmmakers that were experimenting in this format. And I think the fact that I got to work with two females as first-time directors for my very first time was, I can't ask for anything better than that. It took me years to work with another female director, It was in some ways, it was such a deceptive way to enter it because I was like, oh, this is how it always is. Of course there's women that are leading. How could it not be like this? It was hard to get a pulse of how big budget films worked. And I think Stepmom was sort of my first example. And you couldn't have a better ringleader than Chris Columbus. He is just the kindest, sweetest. He's a family man. He works, he calls it at 12 hours. You're not working anything longer. It's a very old-fashioned approach. At that very critical age, I turned 13 on the film set. 12 is you're repellent to advice. You know, anyone gives you advice as a 12-year-old, it's like knives in your ear, you know, like it just feels like they don't get you, they don't believe in you. And I think that was the coolest thing, is that both of those women and Chris Columbus and pretty much everyone on set kind of instinctually knew that about me. And so instead of telling me like, oh, this is what you should be doing, kid, they just led by example, you know? And I really learned so much just by watching Susan and watching Julia and watching Ed and getting to watch Chris and watching the DP. And just, it was such a big budget thing that I got to be really involved in. I remember just watching Susan, and she just never had her shoulders up. It was always this ease, this confidence, this ease. I think that they built all of my inner architecture. You know what I mean? Like, I think about who I am on set and how I want to show up and how I love to be and how I treat people. And I'm just like, oh, it must have been built on that film, you know, because it was just, there was no bad eggs. On a personal level, Gretchen was the first time I wanted to play someone who was a love interest or potentially in the sexualized Hollywood world. Like, it was the first time I wore eyeliner. Prior to that, I was a child actor. I was, you know, playing my age, and then all of a sudden, you know, I'm 16 and now I'm reading new things, and all of a sudden there's all this like romance and love interest and girl next door, and it's all like, I can't read it. I don't want to audition for it. I don't see myself in it. Because the biggest thing is that what I really felt when I was growing up and sort of becoming a woman or learning to harness my own sexuality was that, like, I didn't see myself in any of the roles. I felt like everyone wanted me to be something that I was not. They wanted my hair to look like this. They wanted my body to look like this. They wanted me to act like this. And I just never felt like it was very honest or real for my own experience. And when I read Donnie Darko, I was like, oh, this is like a romantic role I can dive into, right? Because it's not about the romance. It's just about meeting someone that means something to you. And that meaning becomes so charged that it is sexual, that it is romantic and potentially life-altering. It's interesting that like sort of such a like traumatic, tragic girl was like my first romantic role, but I loved it. I think it was also the first time I was ever a part of something that had such a cool soundtrack as well. You know, Stepmom obviously had a place where I was like, oh, David Bowie, and, you know, some cool things. But this was like cool and like far reaches and things that even I wasn't aware of. I feel like Richard Kelly was always like kind of putting me on to new music, and that was one of the first things that he sent everyone was a burned CD with all of the songs that he wanted. I wish I still had it. I had a whole book of CDs that was in my car forever that I found, and I was like, I'm just gonna give this to a thrift store. And so I think somewhere in the northeast of Los Angeles, there's a book of CDs that has the original Donnie Darko burnt soundtrack on it. I watched Saved again recently on the big screen Vidiots, this great, you know, archival revivalist theater in Eagle Rock played it, and I got to watch it with an audience. And I think it's almost turned into a little bit of like Rocky Horror Picture Show, where it was like everyone knew certain words and they were like singing along. You know, it felt like there was like things, there was even like talkbacks, like callback moments where I was like, whoa, this is like new. I think it's just such a fun, perfect film. And I just played it for my son recently. He's 10 years old, and he was like, oh, I like this. It's cool to find things that are for everyone. Anne Hathaway was going to be doing Hillary for a second, and we had the money, and there was like some mob that gave us money in Florida, and then like Sandy Stern, who did Being John Malkovich, went down and like was gonna go get an envelope or like a briefcase full of money from the mob in Florida, like to make the movie. I was like, what is going on here? And then it fell through because obviously none of those things together are good things. And then it kind of came back around, and Mandy Moore had been circling it, and I was like, I think I want to play Hilary Faye. She's like the more interesting character, you know? And Brian's like, no, you have to be Mary. You have to do, and I was like, okay, you're right. It's like, it's a very, you know, it's like the grounding force in the movie. When I think of that film, I often think of like all of the iterations that it could have been, you know, just because it was so many different things before it became what it was. I think that it was just the right time, the right point in all of our lives that felt like doing a film about women felt so radical. Being on set with women felt so radical that it wasn't something that we were thinking that it was nothing. I love the beginnings, Carrie's beginnings and how that was her first film, and it was just so special to get to lean on each other and just see her bloom, and it really felt special. I remember the first time we went in to see the sort of Bennett home, we all played sardines. We just played games inside this giant house, this big estate manor, and I think it really, I think it was really easy to bond on that one. It was really easy. Everyone had a very open heart, and I think we all knew how special it was. In that elevator, I knew that was going to be a special scene, but I remember talking to Francis and being like, okay, great. So it's going to be like, we're going to build the elevator, it's going to be a set. And he's like, no, we're shooting it at the Marriott. We're shooting it at this real hotel. And I was like, okay. So it's like, we've bought the hotel, right? He's like, no, we've only bought one floor, or the lobby and this floor that we can get off at. Everything in between we didn't buy, and so there was just a lot of, it wasn't as easy as it looks. Yeah. The elevator wasn't working. Jen had some food poisoning, so she wasn't able to be there for all of it. One time I, stripped down and tried to leave, and the door had opened on another floor, and there was an employee there carrying Starbucks coffees. It was just it's one of those things where it's like, I'm so glad that it looks better than it felt, because on every level, we couldn't film this angle, and then my breast was shown, and and then I couldn't get all of the clothes off in time. The timing was so hard, and so I'm walking out of the elevator with my pants pulled down to my knees, Band-Aids on my nipples, and just waddle. There was nothing that felt sexy about that at all. I'm glad people like it, but it was definitely not an empowering scene. It was intimidating shoes to fill. I read all of the novels. I had my wisdom teeth removed, and I was laying in bed for 3 days eating ice cream, and the audition came in, and I was like, I love this character. I think it's so amazing. I loved the first movie. And I called my sister, and I was like, I think I'm gonna go out for Joanna Mason. And they're like, you're not right for that. They're like, great, good job, have fun, but you're not gonna get that role. And I was like, okay, great. I have a fan basically telling me don't even try. And so I was like, okay, well, if I'm not gonna get it, then I'm just gonna have fun. And so I remember going in, and I was just like, I have to cultivate. I just woke up on the wrong side of the bed. I'm like, I'm just gonna cultivate this anger. I just let everything piss me off that day. And I came in, and Francis, Lawrence, the sweetest director in the entire universe, so kind. It's like, hi, Jenna. And I was like, all right, when can we do this? I wouldn't even talk to him. I was just visibly so angry. And everyone was like, whoa, okay, all right. We can start. It felt like it was very kismet. It felt like it was something that nobody wanted me to do. And so I got to have a lot of fun. And it felt like those are the best kind of things, when you can just take a lot of risks and take a lot of swings. I felt really nervous on that one. I think I was such a admirer of both of their work. And I think sometimes actors, particularly myself, get into a little head trippy of well, it's a small role. I'm not going to make any fuss. I'm just going to come in, do my work, and no one needs to know I'm there, And it's the opposite of what the kind of environment Paul fosters. The apple on the table that no one will see gets just as much attention as the leading actor's close-up. Every single detail is thought of, incorporated, talked about, smelled, spat on. I feel like there's just so much of a world that he builds. He trusts all of his department heads so much, and they potentially also trust him, that it becomes this world building experiment that's not sci-fi. That's very much about humanity. That's very much about the moment. And I just think he world builds like no other. I felt like I got to get lost. It felt like the most important scene in the movie, which is so rare for an actor coming in for 3 days to feel like it's important at all, and I think that's really special. And Joaquin was just amazing and so funny, and I loved getting to be behind his coverage when Paul and him, because they obviously have such a lovely long-standing history where Paul's just like, all right, maybe scream. All right, now we're gonna and drop the water. Just thinking of these sort of absurd, Inherent Vice has such a beautiful language of absurdity to play with. So Young Kim is so incredible. I've been a fan of her work since Treeless Mountain. We were friends before we did Lovesong. I had known them and her amazing husband as well, Bradley Russ Gray. And Brad and I had always been there was a script that we were going to try to do together. It never really worked out. And then just sort of quietly was like, oh, I have this one that, we just got financed and we're going to do in 2 months. And so it's going to be you and Riley. And she already had the whole thing crafted. And I was like, oh, okay. So she's like, you just need to show up at the state. And I think that she's the kind of director that loves bringing in people she trusts because it allows this space to be cultivated just by the people that are in the room. And I'd never met Riley before. We met, I think the day before we started filming. And I was like, oh, I get it. I see why So cast the two of us. It makes so much sense because it was just instantly a visceral connection between us. And I love when a director also really believes in the cast so much or in the process so much that none of the dialogue needs to be fully written. It's a lot of circumstances that these characters find themselves in. The original script was 30 pages, I think. It had a lot of space for movement and experimentation and a lot of silence, which I think something we've been losing slowly but surely over decades is the ability to create something that demands our attention. And I think silence is such a violent weapon of education and empowerment and poetry that, the less we use it, the less potent things become. And I think one of the best things about that is just how she uses silence. For me, the similarities potentially between the record and the tones of that and Love Lies Bleeding is that I really love investigating the female scumbag. I think it's such an unexplored genre. I think all of the 70s, we were gifted with these films, these archetypes of the male scumbag that's sort of written the architecture of, cinephile, whatever. And women just have not gotten enough of that kind of love. And I think that when I read this script, I was like, oh my God, all of my dreams are coming true right now. And I think Rose Glass is an incredible filmmaker, the ballsiest, she's just taking swings that I've never had a filmmaker take those kind of swings. And so getting to just get into and play in that world and find the little bit of what I could do for her in service of her narratives felt incredible. I think I tend to want to write more about the female scumbag, and there's a lot of songs on this record, Flowers for Men, that explore that, while trying to lift the masculine divine. I'm also simultaneously trying to lift the female toxic.